What if I told you the biggest thing holding you back right now isn't your past, isn't other people, it's what you refuse to let go of? That one memory, that one mistake,
Right.
that one person you keep replaying in your head. You think holding on gives you control, but what if it's actually controlling you? Every sleepless night, every overthought conversation, every moment of anxiety, it all comes down to one silent habit. You don't know how to let go. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't learn to release it, it will slowly drain your happiness, your confidence, and eventually your identity. But today, you're about to learn something powerful. Not motivation, not fake positivity, but a real, practical way to finally free your mind. This is the art of letting go. Hello, everyone. Hi, all. Welcome to Book Podcast Zone.
It is genuinely great to be here with you today.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this one.
Me too. We're taking on something pretty profound today. Our deep dive into the source material is centered on this foundational text, Mind Shift, the art of letting go. And specifically, we're exploring this rigorous 15-part journey that's outlined in its core breakdown. We are really tearing down the illusion that your external circumstances are the problem.
Which is, I mean, that's what everyone blames, right? The outside world.
Exactly. But we are going to deconstruct exactly how your inner world completely dictates your real external life. And we aren't just going to trade an abstract philosophy here.
No, we want the practical stuff.
Right. We're going to get into the neurobiology, the actual mechanics of the mind, to provide practical frameworks for releasing those mental anchors that are keeping you stuck.
I love that. And we really need to unpack this right from the origin point, because the source material spends a lot of time on this idea of the crossroads of mind.
Yes, the crossroads.
It describes this invisible tug of war that is basically steering every single choice we make throughout the day. And I mean, we all feel that tension, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You feel it literally in your chest when you have to make a decision. But I want to understand the why behind it. Like, why does this tug of war even exist? Why can't you just make a choice and move on?
Well, because it's not just a mood. It's not a fleeting feeling. It is a fundamental, structurally embedded battle within human neurobiology.
Wait, like a physical battle in the brain?
Literally. When you are standing at a crossroads, your brain is engaged in a literal war between two different systems.
Okay.
You have the prefrontal cortex, that's the logical, forward-thinking part of your brain, and it's propelling you toward potential reward, growth, expansion.
Right, the part that says go for it.
Exactly. But simultaneously, your amygdala, which is your brain's ancient threat detection center, is just slamming on the brakes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because the amygdala perceives the unknown as a threat to your survival. So your desires pull you toward the unknown, but your fear violently pulls you back toward safety, toward predictability, and the known.
So that's why it feels so agonizing.
That's exactly why making a difficult choice feels like you are being physically ripped in two directions. You are experiencing the friction between evolution's drive for progress and its mandate for survival.
But, I mean, is it always just this classic simple battle between the heart and the head? Because when you look at it in the real world, it seems so much messier than that.
How do you mean?
Well, take a situation like someone sitting in a coffee shop in Seattle.
Okay, classic Seattle coffee shop.
Right, it's pouring rain, they're staring at a laptop, totally paralyzed. Tab A is an offer for a highly lucrative, perfectly safe corporate promotion.
Safe bet.
Yeah. And tab B is the business plan for this risky pie-in-the-sky passion project they've dreamed about for a decade. The internal conflict they're feeling in that coffee shop isn't just a spreadsheet calculation about money versus passion, is it? It feels like it goes deeper.
You're hitting on the core mechanism there. It is never just about the logistics. It is about identity.
Identity?
Yeah. In that Seattle coffee shop, the choice isn't Joe A versus Joe B. The choice is, who am I?
Oh, wow.
Am I the responsible, secure provider who reliably climbs the ladder? Or am I the daring, slightly reckless innovator who builds something from scratch?
So they're choosing a version of themselves.
Exactly. The tug of war is agonizing because to choose one path, you actually have to let go of the identity associated with the other. The fear isn't just about failing at the passion project. It's the profound grief of mourning the secure, successful corporate version of yourself that you are actively leaving behind. You are letting go of a potential version of you.
You're grieving an unlived life. I mean, every choice is basically a micro-death of the alternative.
That's a great way to put it.
So if we distill this, the takeaway is that recognizing the tug-of-war is the first step, and understanding that the struggle is between competing identities, not just competing options, allows you to finally make a conscious choice. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
Right, and that tension of competing identities doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It actually stems from what the text calls echoes of attachment.
Articles of attachment.
Yeah, it explores why letting go often feels like we are literally losing a limb and attributes this pain to the stories we cling to.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this phrase,
Yeah.
echoes of attachment. It implies that the thing we are holding on to isn't even real anymore. It's just a reverberation, like
Yeah.
it's a ghost.
That's exactly how the ego operates. Human brains are fundamentally narrative-generating machines.
We just love stories.
We do. We don't just experience an event, say, winning an award or getting fired. We instantly weave that event into a cohesive story about who we are.
Right.
And over time, the brain begins to blur the lines. It confuses things that happen to us with who we fundamentally are. The ego builds its entire structural integrity on these narratives.
So we become the story.
Yes. So when you try to let go of a past grievance or a former job title or an old relationship dynamic, your brain triggers a literal survival response. Cortisol floods your system.
And it thinks it's dying.
Exactly. The ego interprets letting go as an existential threat. It screams, if I am not the person who went through that or achieved that, then who am I? It fears erasure.
Oh, man. You see this all the time. I have a buddy from Texas who's this massive high school football star.
Oh, Friday Night Lights.
Exactly. He's in his 40s now, working a regular job, but mentally, he is still wearing that varsity jacket.
Right.
Every conversation somehow loops back to that one championship game under the Friday Night Lights 20 years ago.
Right.
He clings to that story because it was the absolute peak of his identity.
And letting it go feels like losing himself.
Exactly. But obviously holding on to that is keeping him from finding any real purpose in his life right now. How do we differentiate between honoring our past and being trapped by the echo of it?
Well, it comes down to separating the values from the event.
What do you mean?
Honoring your past means acknowledging it as a chapter in your book. Being trapped by it means refusing to turn the page.
Ooh, I like that.
For your friend in Texas, that varsity jacket is functioning as a suit of armor against the uncertainties and mundanities of his 40s. To let it go, he doesn't have to pretend the championship didn't happen.
Right. You just have to erase it.
No, he just has to recognize that the jacket no longer fits the man he is today. The psychological pivot is extracting the underlying traits.
Like what?
Well, what did football require of him? Discipline, teamwork, resilience under pressure. He can take those traits and apply them to his current life.
So he's still using the skills.
Exactly. He isn't the former quarterback anymore. He is a man who knows how to lead a team. Letting go is about keeping the wisdom from the story while leaving the heavy, rigid shell behind.
So you keep the nutrients, but you throw away the packaging.
Precisely.
That completely reframes it. Okay, so the takeaway here is that our ego clings to past stories to protect our identity. But we can honor those memories by extracting their lessons without letting them dictate our present reality. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
But, extracting those lessons requires us to navigate a very complex internal negotiation.
Because it's never easy.
No, it's not. The source material frames this as the dual mind dilemma, this intense dance between our logical and emotional selves.
Oh, this is where I think so many of us get stuck. It's that maddening feeling of knowing exactly what you should do on paper, but feeling completely physically incapable of doing it.
Right, because logic and emotions speak two entirely different neurochemical languages.
They're not even on the same wavelength.
Not at all. Logic driven by your prefrontal cortex dictates what you should release. Your rational brain can look at the data of a toxic relationship or a failing business and say, this is no longer serving you, walk away.
Look at the spreadsheet, it makes no sense.
Exactly. But emotion is the anchor, deeply rooted in the limbic system. Emotion doesn't care about your data or your spreadsheets. It cares about meaning, safety, and attachment.
So they're just fighting.
Well, what is crucial to understand is that this dynamic is not a war where logic must conquer emotion. It is a negotiation.
A negotiation.
Yes. If you try to use cold logic to forcefully overpower a deep emotional attachment, the emotional brain will eventually rebel and sabotage you. You have to bring the emotional brain to the negotiating table.
Okay, let's test this negotiation theory with something happening constantly in the U.S. right now. Take a homeowner in Florida.
Oh, a tough real estate market right now.
Right. Logically, looking at the math, They know they need to sell their house. Insurance premiums have tripled because of hurricane risks. Property taxes are up. It makes absolutely zero financial sense to stay. The logical brain says, sell.
Right. Get out.
But emotionally, they cannot bring themselves to put a sign in the yard because that living room is where their kids took their first steps. That doorframe has the pencil marks tracking their heights.
It's their history.
Exactly. Emotionally, it's not a real estate asset. It's a museum of their family's history. When the financial pressure mounts, who leads the dance? How does logic actually negotiate with that level of emotional attachment?
It's a delicate balance. If logic tries to lead by forcefully dragging emotion across the floor, saying, "You're being financially irresponsible," look at the numbers, the emotional brain will dig its heels in.
It'll just shut down.
Right. The homeowner will subconsciously sabotage the process, maybe by refusing to clean up for showings or wildly overpricing the house. The negotiation requires logic to validate the emotion first.
Okay, so how do they do that?
The homeowner has to sit in that living room and actively grieve. They have to acknowledge, leaving this house genuinely hurts. It feels like abandoning a piece of my family.
They'd have to actually feel it.
Yes, because once the emotional brain feels heard and validated, which actually lowers cortisol levels in the body, it relaxes its grip just a fraction.
And then logic can step in.
Exactly. Then logic can gently propose a new narrative. It can say, we are taking the memories with us. We are selling this physical structure to protect our family's financial future, which honors the family more than the plaster and wood.
Wow.
Logic leads the action, but only after it allows emotion to set the tempo.
You're saying you have to validate the grief of the transition. You literally cannot spreadsheet your way out of a broken heart, even if it's over a piece of real estate.
No, you can't.
To summarize this takeaway, letting go requires a negotiation between logic and emotion, where emotional validation paves the way for logical action. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
Which brings us to perhaps the most aggressive voice in that internal negotiation, which is the inner critic.
The inner critic.
Yeah. The text spends considerable time on how we face this persistent, often cruel voice inside that chains us to our past mistakes, and how we can systematically soften it.
I feel like we all have a roommate living in our heads that we would never, ever tolerate if they lived in our actual house.
That is a perfect analogy.
Why do we speak to ourselves in ways we would never, ever speak to a friend? Where does that voice even come from?
It is the great paradox of our psychology. When we trace the inner critic back to its origin, we find that it almost always develops as a misguided protective mechanism.
Protective. It feels so destructive.
It does, but usually in childhood or early adolescence, you experience a failure, maybe a public embarrassment, or a trauma. Your brain, specifically the amygdala, wants to ensure you never feel that awful vulnerability again.
Okay.
So it creates an internal alarm system. The critic is born. Its original job was to say, hey, don't raise your hand in class, you might sound stupid and get laughed at again.
Oh, so it's just trying to keep you safe.
Exactly. But over time, if left unchecked, it metastasizes. It stops being a warning system and becomes a warden. It keeps you in a tiny, confined cell of safety by constantly reminding you that you aren't good enough to try anything new.
Right.
But here is the critical pivot in the text. Softening it doesn't mean silencing it. Forcing it to be quiet just makes it yell louder. Softening it means changing your relationship to it.
I want to push back on this a little bit, actually, because I see a massive cultural friction here.
Let's hear it.
Look at the hyper-competitive environments in the U.S., places like Wall Street or Silicon Valley. In those cultures, the inner critic is very often mistaken for ambition.
Oh, absolutely.
You have people who are incredibly, phenomenally successful precisely because they are ruthlessly hard on themselves. They use that inner warden as a drill sergeant to grind out 80-hour work weeks. If I'm one of those high performers, my immediate thought is, if I soften that voice, don't I lose my edge? Won't I just become complacent?
It's a very common fear, really common. But it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of human neurobiology and sustainable high performance.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Yes, a harsh inner critic can act as a powerful fuel. You can absolutely build an empire on self-loathing, fear of failure, and adrenaline.
People do it every day.
They do, but that fuel burns incredibly dirty. It relies on constant cortisol spikes, it creates toxic exhaust, severe burnout, clinical anxiety, ruined relationships, and eventual physical collapse.
The crash is inevitable.
Exactly. You don't lose your edge by softening the critic, you refine your edge. Think of it this way. When you are driven by a vicious inner critic, A massive percentage of your daily cognitive energy is spent managing your own anxiety and recovering from your own self-inflicted mental beatings.
Oh, wow. That's so true.
If you replace that harsh critic with an inner coach, a voice that still demands absolute excellence, but offers support rather than shame when you stumble, you reclaim all that wasted energy.
So you actually have more gas in the tank.
Yes, your edge actually becomes sharper because it is driven by purpose, clarity, and dopamine, rather than a desperate need to outrun your own feelings of inadequacy.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the difference between running a race because you want to win versus running a race because you're being chased by a bear.
Exactly.
Both make you run incredibly fast, but one is going to eventually give you a heart attack.
Yeah.
You are basically upgrading your fuel source.
Oh.
The summary takeaway is that our inner critic is a misguided protector, and transforming it from a warden into a coach doesn't dull our ambition. It actually makes our drive sustainable. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
And if we don't upgrade that fuel, we run right into the concept of resistance.
Resistance?
Yes, the text explores the subtle, often invisible ways resistance blocks our growth before we even realize it is happening, and why holding on fundamentally hurts us.
I think resistance is such a slippery concept, you know? We often don't know we are resisting until we are completely and utterly exhausted.
Well, that exhaustion is the primary diagnostic symptom. When we break down the physical and emotional toll of resistance, we see that holding on is never a passive state.
It feels passive, though. It feels like doing nothing.
Right, you might think, I'm just keeping things the way they are, I'm stationary. But neurologically and energetically, holding on to a grudge, a past identity, or a defunct strategy requires constant output.
Constant energy.
Yes. It is like treading water while holding a 20-pound weight above your head.
Oh, that sounds exhausting.
It is. You might look completely still to an observer on the shore, but underneath the surface, you are kicking furiously just to avoid drowning. The allostatic load, the wear and tear on your body from chronic stress required to maintain the status quo when the world around you is changing, is astronomical.
So the resistance itself is what's draining you.
Yes. Resistance blocks growth because you literally have no surplus energy left to invest in moving forward. All your energy is diverted to holding the weight.
Okay, let's look at a really tangible, localized example of this. Think about a multi-generational family hardware store in New England.
Okay.
It's been on the exact same corner for 80 years. The current owner is fiercely resisting the shift to e-commerce, refusing to use modern inventory software, resisting any update to the physical storefront. To that owner, holding on feels like loyalty.
Right, loyalty to the past.
It feels like they're honoring their grandfather, who built the place with his bare hands. But the reality is that the refusal to let go of how we've always done it is slowly, painfully suffocating the business. Their resistance is a massive energetic drain, resulting in a slow surrender to obsolescence. How do we help someone in that position see that holding on is actually destroying the very thing they're trying to save?
The psychological reframing required there is profound. The owner is conflating the method with the mission.
The method and the mission, okay.
The grandfather's mission wasn't to use paper ledgers and avoid computers at all costs. The grandfather's mission was to provide this community with the tools they need to build their lives.
Oh, that's such a good distinction.
By stubbornly holding on to the old methods, the current owner is actually failing the original mission because the community's needs and behaviors have evolved.
They shop online now.
Exactly. To help someone see this, you have to help them disconnect their sense of loyalty from the mechanics of the past. You help them realize that letting go of the old way of doing business isn't a betrayal of the grandfather. It is the ultimate act of devotion to him.
Wow.
You adapt so the legacy can survive. When you realize that the tight grip is the very thing causing the damage, the pain of letting go becomes much more tolerable than the pain of staying the same.
It's realizing that you're gripping the bird so tightly to protect it that you're actually crushing it.
Yes, exactly.
So the takeaway here is that resisting change is an active, exhausting drain on our energy, and true loyalty to a legacy often requires letting go of the outdated methods used to build it. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
That realization leads directly to the core mechanism of psychological freedom, which is the power of choice and awareness.
Choice and awareness.
This is about stepping into the crucial moment where awareness opens the door to real release.
The crucial moment. It sounds incredibly dramatic, but In reality, I assume we were talking about something that happens in a fraction of a second inside our brains.
Exactly. In psychology, there is a profound concept popularized by Viktor Frankl, which states that between stimulus and response, there is a space.
A space.
And in that space lies our power to choose our response. True letting go isn't about achieving some enlightened Zen state where you never feel the pull of the past or the sudden flash of anger.
Right, we're still human.
That is an impossible standard for a human nervous system. Letting go is about noticing the pull, the stimulus, and choosing in that microsecond gap not to react on autopilot. Awareness is simply the active practice of widening that gap.
Let's put this right in the driver's seat. Anyone who has ever driven on the I-405 in Los Angeles knows exactly what I'm about to say.
Oh, the 405, say no more.
It is a slow-crawling parking lot of pure stress.
Yeah.
You are driving, you are already tense, and suddenly a car swerves across 3 lanes and cuts you off, nearly clipping your bumper. The stimulus is the cutoff. The immediate instinct, the pull, is absolute blinding rage. You want to lay on the horn, yell, speed up to ride their bumper.
I want to fight back.
But awareness is realizing in that split second before your hand hits the horn that you actually have a choice. You can let them go. You can choose not to let a stranger's erratic driving hijack your autonomic nervous system.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how on earth do we actually widen that split-second gap when the adrenaline is already flooding our bloodstream?
It is a cognitive muscle that must be trained, and you cannot expect to find that gap on the 405 if you haven't practiced finding it in quieter, lower-stakes moments.
Okay, so how do we practice?
You widen the gap through mindful observation of your own physical state. When you get cut off, before your brain even fully processes the insult, your body reacts.
Oh, yeah. Heart rate spikes.
Your chest tightens, your breath becomes shallow, your grip on the steering wheel turns white-knuckle. The practice is learning to use those physical sensations as a trigger for a pause rather than a trigger for an explosion.
Like an alarm clock.
Yes. You feel the tight chest, and you train your brain to let that sensation mean take one deep breath. That breath is the gap.
Just a breath.
In the 2 seconds it takes to inhale and exhale, the initial rush of purely instinctual amygdala-driven rage peaks and begins to subside. This allows your higher cognitive functions in the prefrontal cortex to step back in and ask, is engaging with this driver worth my peace and safety?
And the answer is usually no.
Exactly. No. You just let them drive away.
You are basically reprogramming your body's alarm system to function as a pause button instead of a launch code.
That's a great way to put it.
That takes serious practice, but the payoff is massive. To summarize this takeaway, freedom isn't the absence of triggering feelings, but the cultivated ability to pause between the trigger and your reaction, giving you the power to choose peace. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates. And let's continue to the next chapter.
Once we secure that pause, we move into the practical application. The text emphasizes exploring gentle tools that transform the act of letting go from a painful loss into a profound gift.
You know, the word gentle really stands out there. Culturally, I think we tend to conceptualize letting go as this violent, dramatic tearing away, like ripping off a bandage or burning a bridge.
That is the popular narrative, yeah. But neurobiologically forceful detachment usually backfires.
Really?
Yes. If you try to violently rip an attachment out of your psyche, say, by aggressively repressing a memory, you leave a psychological wound. Nature abhors a vacuum, and your mind will rush to fill that void with something equally maladaptive, like a new anxiety or a compulsive behavior.
It just replaces it with something else.
Right. The text emphasizes gentle because real, sustainable letting go is a slow unclenching of the hands. It requires neuroplasticity, which takes time.
It's a slow process.
You have to frame release not as a subtraction of value from your life, but as an addition of space. You are not losing something, you are making room for something else.
I love that framing. It reminds me of living in a packed, cluttered apartment in New York City.
Oh yeah, the classic tiny apartment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every shelf is stuffed, the closets are overflowing, you can barely walk. When you finally decide to do a massive spring cleaning, you aren't mourning the bags of old magazines or the clothes you haven't worn in 5 years. You don't view it as losing your possessions.
No, you're relieved.
You view it as gifting yourself room to breathe. You are revealing the square footage that was hidden underneath the mess. But mentally, what does that actually look like? Give me a concrete example of a gentle tool to practice this mental unclenching.
A highly effective tool used in cognitive behavioral therapy is compartmentalized observation.
Okay, what is that?
Well, when you find your mind tightly grouping a painful memory or obsessing over a past mistake, instead of forcefully telling yourself, stop thinking about this, get over it, which never works, you gently set a boundary.
Like scheduling it.
Exactly. You might say to yourself, I see that my mind wants to dwell on this mistake right now. I'm going to give myself exactly 10 minutes to write down every terrible thought and feeling I have about it in a journal.
Oh, so you lean into it.
For a set time, yes. And when the timer goes off, I'm going to close the notebook and make a cup of tea. You aren't suppressing the thought, which is forceful and rigid. You are acknowledging it, giving it a container, and then gently redirecting your attention.
That's brilliant.
Over time, the mind learns that it doesn't need to cling so desperately to the anxiety because you have proven that you will give it space, but you won't let it take over the entire apartment of your mind.
You are giving the thought a designated shelf instead of letting it clutter the whole room. That is incredibly practical. The summary here is that letting go is a gradual, gentle process of unclenching, not a violent removal, and it is fundamentally about creating spaciousness in your mind. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
With that newly created space, the journey shifts toward the concept of surrender, exploring how surrendering creates the necessary environment for fresh perspectives and new roots to grow.
Surrender is a loaded word. In our culture, it usually implies defeat. You wave the white flag, you lost.
And that is exactly what the text aims to redefine. In the context of psychological resilience, surrender is not giving up. It is the absolute radical acceptance of what is.
Radical acceptance.
Yes. As long as you are fighting the factual reality of your present situation, saying this shouldn't have happened to me or it's not fair, you are trapped in the past.
Right.
You are expending massive amounts of cognitive energy warring with a ghost. Only when you drop the resistance, when you surrender to the reality of your circumstances, can your feet finally touch solid ground. And you absolutely need solid ground to plant roots for the future.
Let's look at a stunning macro-level example of this in the U.S. Think about Detroit.
Okay, great example.
Following the decline of the industrial boom, there were vast areas of abandoned, crumbling lots where massive factories used to be. For a long time, there was a collective clinging to what Detroit used to be. A resistance to the reality of the post-industrial landscape.
They wanted the factories back.
Exactly. Yeah. But then you saw the rise of these incredible urban community gardens. Citizens looked at these empty, blighted lots, surrendered the idea that the auto factories were ever coming back to those specific spots, and transformed them into spaces for fresh, literal growth.
They accepted the new reality.
They accepted the soil exactly as it was. But my question is, does surrendering the old always have to happen before the new roots can take hold? Can't they overlap?
They often do overlap in the transition phase, but the deep, stabilizing roots of the new endeavor cannot fully secure themselves until the old structure is completely relinquished.
Okay, so you can't have both long-term.
No. In the Detroit example, you couldn't plant a thriving, sustainable garden on a lot if half the community was still actively trying to pour a concrete foundation for a factory on top of it. The intention for the space had to shift entirely. Psychologically, you can start exploring new hobbies, new relationships, or new career paths while still mourning the old ones. But eventually, to truly thrive in the new space, you have to fully accept that the old era is definitively over. The surrender is what fertilizes the new roots. It is the decomposition of the old identity that provides the psychological nutrients for the new one.
The decomposition of the old identity provides the nutrients for the new one. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The takeaway here is that surrendering is not defeat. It is the radical acceptance of present reality, which is the mandatory first step to cultivating new growth. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
As we start building those new roots, the text takes an introspective turn into what it calls the mind's mirror.
The mind's mirror.
Yes. It focuses on discovering what your external reflections reveal about your internal landscape.
This sounds a lot like psychological projection. The idea that what severely bothers us in other people is actually a spotlight on what we haven't resolved in ourselves.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. The things we refuse to let go of internally, our deepest insecurities, our suppressed desires, our unhealed wounds, do not just sit quietly in the dark corners of our brain.
They bleed out.
They project outward, like a movie onto the screen of other people's behaviors. When you had a disproportionate, highly emotional reaction to someone else's action, it is rarely just about them. The intensity of your reaction is almost always a mirror reflecting an attachment or a fear that you are tightly holding on to.
Okay, let's play this out in a common U.S. corporate setting.
Yeah.
You were working in an office in Atlanta.
Okay.
There's a coworker who constantly brags about how much they overwork. Oh, I was online until 2 a.m. I worked all weekend, haven't slept.
We all know that person.
Right, and for some reason, this coworker completely infuriates you.
Mm.
It triggers a deep, visceral annoyance that goes way beyond just rolling your eyes at a water cooler.
Okay.
According to this concept, that mirror is reflecting something back at me. It suggests that my anger isn't really about their annoying behavior. It reflects my own internal struggle. Maybe it reflects my own inability to let go of the need for validation through burnout. Maybe I secretly feel guilty when I rest. So seeing them perform their exhaustion triggers my own deep-seated insecurity about not doing enough.
That is a flawless analysis of projection.
Right.
Absolutely. If you were completely secure in your own boundaries and you had truly let go of the cultural narrative that exhaustion equals worth, that coworker wouldn't infuriate you.
I just wouldn't care.
You would just look at them with mild compassion, realizing they are stressed and seeking validation, and you would go about your day. The intensity of your trigger is the map to your own internal blockages.
A map. I like that.
The mind uses the external world to show you what you need to work on internally. When you start treating your emotional triggers as diagnostic tools rather than just external annoyances, you gain a massive amount of self-awareness. You stop trying to change the coworker, and you start examining why you are still holding on to the toxic belief they represent.
It turns every irritating interaction into a breadcrumb trail leading back to your own healing. That is incredibly empowering, even if it's uncomfortable to admit. To summarize this takeaway, the intense emotional triggers we experience in response to others are often mirrors reflecting the internal attachments and insecurities we have yet to let go of. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
Understanding those internal blocks prepares us for the next phase, which is stepping beyond familiar patterns. The text dives into the biological imperative to stay in the comfort zone and what it actually takes to walk away from it.
Yeah, we hear comfort zone thrown around a lot, but our brains are genuinely wired to prioritize predictability over almost everything else, including our own happiness, aren't they?
They absolutely are. There is a deeply ingrained biological imperative to maintain homeostasis, to stay in the comfort zone.
Right.
The primitive brain equates known with safe and unknown with dangerous. It operates on a simple, ancient evolutionary algorithm. If you survived yesterday doing X again today means you will probably survive until tomorrow.
Just keep doing what works.
Therefore, the brain will fight tooth and nail to keep you in a familiar pattern, even if that pattern is a miserable relationship or a dead-end job. It prefers a predictable misery over an unpredictable joy. Letting go, by definition, requires walking away from the predictable and intentionally stepping into the unpredictable.
I think about the classic story of leaving your hometown. Say you live in a small, isolated town in the Midwest.
Okay.
You know everyone, you know the routine, but you feel completely stagnant. You decide to pack up and move to a bustling city, Chicago or New York, without a solid plan. The familiar pattern back home was safe, but you were withering away. The new life in the city is terrifying, but it is vibrant and full of potential.
A huge leap.
The transition between those two states is pure, unadulterated anxiety. How do we convince our primitive brain that the terror of the unknown is actually excitement? How do we hack that biological response?
You hack it by redefining the physical sensations.
Redefining them.
Yes. The physiological response to terror and excitement is almost identical in the human body. Your heart rate elevates, your palms sweat, your stomach gets butterflies, your cortisol and adrenaline spike.
Oh, true. They feel the same.
The difference is entirely in the cognitive label your prefrontal cortex applies to those sensations. When you step off the bus in that bustling city and your heart starts pounding, your primitive amygdala says, warning, threat, we don't know where we are, retreat.
Right, run away.
You have to consciously step in with your higher reasoning and say, no, this isn't a threat, this is anticipation, this is the physical feeling of my life expanding.
Oh.
You have to actively talk to your nervous system. You acknowledge the intense discomfort, but you reframe it as the necessary friction of growth. You tell yourself, I am not in danger, I am simply in unfamiliar territory.
You change the label on the jar from poison to spices. It's the exact same physical feeling, but a totally different mental framework. The takeaway here is that our brains resist letting go because they crave predictable safety, but we can override this by cognitively relabeling the anxiety of the unknown as the excitement of growth. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
Navigating that friction requires a specific kind of mental environment, which the text refers to as the silence between thoughts.
The silence between thoughts.
It explores the unexpected peace found in stillness, and why finding it is becoming the greatest challenge for the modern mind.
Because we are dealing with a modern epidemic of overstimulation. Our minds are just a constant, deafening stream of noisy attachments and inputs.
Exactly. We are living in an attention economy that literally profits off our inability to be still. When your mind is constantly stimulated, your default mode network is continually hijacked, generating new attachments to news cycles, to social media drama, to the endless ping of emails.
It never stops.
The silence between thoughts that the text refers to isn't about emptying your mind completely, which is a common and frustrating misconception about meditation.
Right, trying to think of nothing.
It is about slowing the frequency of the noise so you can actually experience the gap between one anxiety and the next. That silence is where true release lives, because in that momentary silence, you are untethered from the past and unbothered by the future.
Let's talk about the quintessential U.S. addiction, which is smartphones. It is staggering to watch. You pull up to a red light, and the second the car stops, the head goes down, the phone comes out.
Every time.
People are checking notifications while waiting in line at the grocery store for 90 seconds. We are functionally terrified of stillness. If you take away the phone, people start to exhibit actual withdrawal symptoms. They twitch, they get irritable.
It's an addiction.
So, if we're neurobiologically conditioned to demand constant noise and dopamine hits, how can someone practically locate that silence between thoughts? How do you find it when the world is screaming at you?
You have to manufacture micro moments of deprivation.
Micro moments.
You cannot expect to go from a state of 247 digital stimulation to an hour of deep, silent meditation on a cushion. It will feel like psychological torture to your dopamine-depleted brain.
You'll just quit.
Exactly. Instead, you start by reclaiming the mundane moments. When you are at that red light, purposely leave the phone in the center console. Grip the steering wheel and actively notice the sensation of the leather under your hands. Listen to the hum of the engine.
Just be in the car.
Yes. When you are in the grocery line, simply look at the people around you. You will feel an intense, almost painful urge to distract yourself. That urge is the withdrawal symptom of an overstimulated brain.
And you just sit with it.
Your practice is to simply observe that urge without acting on it. Every single time you successfully stand in line for 2 minutes without checking your phone, you are expanding your neurological tolerance for stillness. You are widening the silence between thoughts.
It's basically exposure therapy for boredom. And in that manufactured boredom, you actually find peace. To summarize this takeaway, modern overstimulation prevents letting go by constantly generating new noise. But by intentionally practicing micro moments of stillness, we can rediscover the peace that exists beneath the mental chatter. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
That stillness allows us to hear the underlying scripts running our lives. The text dives deep into the architecture of our ego in a section about uncovering the narratives that shape our identity and learning which of those narratives we desperately need to rewrite.
We touched on identity earlier, but this seems to go much deeper into the actual script we are unconsciously reading from every day.
It does. Identity is not a fixed biological trait like your height or your eye color.
Yeah.
Identity is largely a construct of repeated narratives.
Stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly. From the moment you were born, you were handed stories by your parents, your culture, your education system, your peers. You are the smart one. You are the quiet one. Success looks like X. You internalize these stories and repeat them to yourself thousands of times until they solidify into what feels like objective reality. But many of these stories are entirely obsolete.
Obsolete.
They were written for a version of you that no longer exists, or they were written by someone else entirely. True freedom requires a rigorous audit of your internal narratives.
I think the most pervasive script we have in this country is the classic American dream narrative.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's say someone has held on to the story that success only looks like a house in the suburbs, a corporate job, a massive 401k, and a white picket fence. That was the script they were handed by their parents.
Very common script.
But let's say they actually live in a thriving urban loft. They run a slightly chaotic but deeply fulfilling freelance business, and they are surrounded by a diverse, unconventional, chosen family. Objectively, they have a wonderful, rich life.
But internally,
Internally, they feel like a failure because they are constantly judging their reality against an inherited story. They need to rewrite that narrative, But how do we spot the stories that aren't actually ours? They feel so deeply embedded in our subconscious.
You spot them by looking for the points of friction.
Friction.
When your lived experience feels genuinely good and aligned, but your internal dialogue is telling you it's wrong or not enough, that cognitive dissonance is a clear indicator of an inherited, obsolete story. The friction is the gap between your authentic self and the script you are forcing yourself to read.
That makes total sense.
To rewrite it, you have to trace the story back to its origin. You ask yourself, whose voice is actually telling me that living in a loft is a failure? Is that my voice or is that my father's voice? Is that a societal expectation from a 1950s television show?
Wow, locating the source.
Once you identify the true author of the story, you can mentally hand the script back to them. You can consciously say, that was your definition of success, but it is not mine. You let go of their story so you can finally inhabit your actual life.
You fire the ghostwriters of your life.
Yeah.
I think that is a profound shift in perspective. The summary here is that our identity is built on repeated narratives, many of which are inherited and obsolete. And true freedom comes from identifying the friction they cause and consciously rewriting our own definition of success. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
Doing that audit brings us to the emotional core of this entire process. The central thesis here is that finding compassion for yourself is the absolute non-negotiable key to true letting go. We must release judgment.
This is where I think the rubber meets the road, and where it gets incredibly difficult. We are culturally conditioned to believe that if you do something wrong, if you make a mistake, you must punish yourself.
Yes, and that punishment usually takes the form of relentless, brutal self-judgment. But here is the psychological and neurobiological reality. You cannot shame yourself into letting go. It is scientifically impossible.
Really? Impossible.
Shame and judgment trigger the release of cortisol and create rigidity in the nervous system. When you harshly judge yourself for a past mistake, your defense mechanisms flare up. You tense up, you hide, you obsess, your worldview narrows.
You just get stuck.
Exactly. Compassion, on the other hand, stimulates oxytocin and creates psychological flexibility. It creates an internal environment where it is actually safe to look at the mistake objectively. We hold on to past mistakes and replay them endlessly because we hold a false, toxic belief that judging ourselves for them is what prevents us from repeating them. We think our shame is our moral compass.
Let me give you a high-stakes example to see how this plays out. Think about a high-end chef in New Orleans.
Very intense environment.
Very. The food scene there is intensely competitive and culturally revered. Let's say this chef completely ruins a major Friday night dinner service. The sauce broke, the fish was overcooked, VIP guests walked out. The chef goes home and mentally flays themselves alive.
Just brutalizes themselves.
Beating themselves up feels like they're taking the craft seriously. They think if they don't punish themselves, it means they don't care about the food. But the reality is that intense self-judgment and shame paralyzes them. When they walk into the kitchen for the next service, their hands are shaking, they're second-guessing every grain of salt, and they are actually more likely to make another mistake.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
The judgment didn't protect them, it disabled them. So how do we practice compassion without crossing the line into making excuses for bad behavior?
That is the critical distinction, and it's where people misunderstand compassion. Compassion is not a free pass. Compassion is not saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter that the service was ruined, everybody makes mistakes.
Right, that's just apathy.
Exactly. Compassion is separating your inherent worth as a human being from your performance in a specific moment. It is saying, I care deeply about my craft, and I am incredibly disappointed that I ruined that service. I need to figure out exactly why the sauce broke so I can fix my technique. But ruining a service does not mean I am a worthless failure of a human being.
Oh, that's powerful.
Judgment attacks your identity. Compassion attacks the problem. When the chef approaches the failure with compassion, they can actually let go of the emotional devastation and focus all their cognitive energy on practical, mechanical improvement. Compassion provides the psychological safety required to learn from the mistake and move on.
Judgment looks at the past and says, you are bad. Compassion looks at the past and says, that was bad, now how do we get better? It is the difference between an anchor dragging you down and a rudder steering you forward. The takeaway here is that self-judgment locks our past mistakes into place, while self-compassion provides the flexibility and safety needed to learn, release, and move forward. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next chapter.
This leads us directly to the root cause of all our clinging. the text proposes a radical idea regarding the illusion of control, suggesting that embracing uncertainty is the ultimate invitation to freedom.
When you look at everything we've talked about, the tug of war, the inner critic, the resistance, it really all just boils down to the illusion of control, doesn't it?
It does. Everything we have discussed stems from the ego's desperate need to control outcomes. We hold on because we have a deep-seated belief that if we let go, chaos will consume us. We believe our grip is the only thing keeping the world spinning.
But it's an illusion.
Completely. We control very little in this world other than our own internal responses. Embracing uncertainty is the ultimate form of letting go. It is the realization that you cannot predict the future, and more importantly, that you don't need to. When you let go of the need for a guaranteed outcome, you transform the paralyzing fear of the unknown into curiosity.
I was thinking about how to illustrate this, and nothing says lack of control like a road trip.
Oh, definitely.
Imagine doing a classic drive across Route 66. If you are a person who deeply clings to control, you plan every single minute. You know exactly where you will be at 2:00 p.m., where you will eat at 6:00 p.m., what exact hotel room you will sleep in.
The spreadsheet traveler.
Yes. But then, somewhere outside of Albuquerque, you get a flat tire. If you are gripped by the need for control, that flat tire completely ruins the trip. This is a disaster. Your cortisol spikes, you are furious, the day's lost.
Ruined.
But if you practice embracing uncertainty, you look at the flat tire entirely differently. Yes, the timeline is broken, but you let it go. And because you aren't blinded by rage and stress hormones, you notice a small, dusty, amazing roadside diner right near where you pulled over.
And you just roll with it.
You go in, you meet incredibly interesting locals, you eat the best pie of your life, and it becomes the absolute highlight of the entire trip. If you embrace uncertainty, the disruption becomes the discovery.
That perfectly encapsulates the shift. The rigid travelers traveling through a spreadsheet, the open travelers traveling through the actual world. Life is going to give you flat tires. It is going to dismantle your meticulously crafted plans.
It's guaranteed.
If your baseline for happiness is entirely dependent on things going exactly as you predicted, you will spend your entire life frustrated, anxious, and disappointed. Embracing uncertainty means trusting your own inherent resilience. It means saying, I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, but I trust my ability to handle it when it arrives.
Trusting yourself.
Yes, that shift from trying to forcefully control the external world to trusting yourself to navigate it is the essence of true freedom.
It's swapping out the rigid script for improvisation. You trust yourself to handle the scene, whatever happens. And the summary here is that the need for control is an illusion that causes suffering. And by embracing uncertainty, we can transform anxiety into curiosity and open ourselves up to unexpected joy. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates. And let's continue to the next chapter.
And so we arrive at the culmination of the text. It offers a gentle reminder that letting go is not a destination. It is a lifelong art, and it directs our gaze toward where we head next.
I think it is so crucial to emphasize that this isn't a checklist you complete. You don't just let go of your baggage on a Tuesday afternoon and then walk around enlightened for the rest of your life.
Absolutely not. If there is one final synthesis of this entire journey, it is exactly that. Letting go is not a one-time achievement. It is a daily, lifelong practice of psychological hygiene.
Like brushing your teeth.
Exactly. Just as you brush your teeth every single day to prevent decay, you must practice awareness, surrender, and self-compassion every day to prevent the buildup of mental attachments and resentments. You will inevitably face new crossroads. You will encounter new mirrors in the people you meet. Your inner critic will absolutely try to sneak back in wearing a new disguise.
It always does.
But now you have the frameworks. You understand the neurobiological mechanics of the tug of war. You know how to negotiate the dual mind dilemma without letting emotions sabotage you. You know that letting go is an addition of space, not a subtraction of self. The journey continues because life continues to evolve, and your ability to flow with it, rather than fiercely fight it, will determine your ultimate peace.
We spend so much time curating what we want to acquire in life skills, relationships, possessions, titles. But what if your ultimate legacy isn't defined by what you gather, but by what you are brave enough to leave behind? Look at your hands right now. What are you holding on to today that is blocking you from reaching out for tomorrow? Thank you for joining us on Book Podcast, Goodbye.
Take care, everyone.